These are hickories from America, and the hickory trees in America are large trees, and together with some of the great oaks of the eastern forests make up and made up the great forests of North America. And the hickories, there's about 14 different species. The pecan is a hickory, and that's one that's been developed commercially, so people have eaten pecan nuts. These are shagbark and shellbark hickories. The shagbark has a shedding bark, and that's what shag means in that country. So it has strips of bark on the older trees, a most peculiar trait, although if you come to Australia, there are many, many trees that have shedding bark. And the shellbark hickory is probably large enough for humans to eat, and certainly the natives ate them. The shagbark is smaller. We import into this country, and for sale in every town in Australia, is hickory handles for tools. It's one of the best woods in the world. And as you probably know, we also import sawdust. So the English buy the trees mostly. They make tool handles out of them. They send them around the world, and they also send us the sawdust from the trees used for smoking meats and cheeses. So while it used to be very difficult to get around the world, and people sometimes took a year or two to get from England to Australia, and sometimes died on the coast while coming here on the great roaring 40 winds, we can now afford to import sticks from around the world and the dust from that tree. But there weren't any here on the continent when I came that I could find, and so I imported a few. I brought in very few seed, but these I have brought in, and these are now making babies. They take about 30 years to bear fruit. Up in there is a northern red oak. There are macadamia nuts just here, and you can see more back toward the home site, and they're used here as a windbreak. And people said you couldn't grow macadamias here, but you can. These are a colder, hardy variety, not the American horticultural one that came from the Queensland nuts that were growing in coastal sands. These are another species growing in the mountains of New South Wales. There's 14 species, 4 of them are edible. There's an unknown walnut there, 25 or 30 years old. I'm waiting for it to bear. And here, not a very happy tree with too much shade, is a sloe or blackthorn from England. It's a plum that is only 1/4 of an inch in diameter, and it's not edible. But it has a beautiful flavor in its skin, but it's very puckerish, so it's a dare among children in England just to eat one. If you put one in your mouth, you're going to spit it out and be sorry you've tasted it. But if you cook it, you get a flavor out of the skin, which is lovely. So it's used for sloe, S-L-O-E, sloe jam or jelly, which is often eaten with wild birds, game birds, or venison, and sloe gin, if it's steeped in gin, or sloe wine. It is truly an English plant, although now, of course, it's grown in a few other places. And the wood is hard, heavy, dense, and black. Hard and dense like many fruit woods. And this one in particular was the choice of the Celts as a fighting weapon wood. So they fought each other, and they fought other people, and they even fought the Romans with wooden weapons often. And it was the English billy club for 150 years, and the American police baton as well, now replaced by other materials. There's a northern spy apple in here, which is one of the rootstocks from the 1800s, and before it was a rootstock, it was commonly grown as and used as an apple. It's not used anymore. We have better rootstocks, but I've saved it, and it gives us some apples. There's something sort of bright over here with some sun on it, and indeed it often is bright. It's an Elaeagnus umbellata from Japan. I think they've given it a common name now, autumn olive, but Elaeagnus, Ela means light, Agnes means chaste. It has a white underside to its leaf, so it's probably come from a part of Japan which is either coastal or alpine, and Japan has quite a variety in its islands. And there's more stuff right through here. And there's plants in pots and boxes, and they're surrounded by various weeds. Some of that is deliberate and some is accidental. I wanted to raise my plants naturally, not on concrete or basalt or plastic. I didn't want to have them in an artificial media. I wanted to have them in a mixture of earth and other substances. I want them to grow in a place like they have always grown, under their parents and around other plants, because while men think they know a lot about lots of things, I'm afraid they still don't know that much about the world, and they don't know that much about genetics either. We're still just learning, and some genes are turned on and off depending on the situation that creatures live in and the chemicals they're exposed to. So while we can look at lots of living things in the modern world and say, yes, that's such and such, and that's so and so, well, they appear to be, but they may very well be different on a microbiological level. And I would like things to be more like they used to be and less like we want them to be. I have some other wisdom here. This one comes from Alice in Wonderland. I don't know how many of you have read the book. If you've seen Disney's movie, there's a white rabbit and he says something like, I'm late for a very important date. He doesn't say that in the book. He pulls out a watch from his pocket and he looks at it and he says, so little time, so much to do, and puts that watch back and hops away in his activity. Some people have altered that recently, and they changed it to so many books, so little time. And I like both of them. The first law of intelligent tinkering. There are men who tinker with things. And so they should know the first law of intelligent tinkering is to save all the pieces. So if you're taking somebody's watch apart or trying to fix the wife's washing machine or trying to fix your own car, you don't wind up with something in your hand and go, what is this? And then throw it. You know, you have to save the pieces. So this garden is in fact an attempt by one human being to try to save some of the pieces of this planet before we obliterify it, as some people might say.